parameters, and you can adjust it any way you want. One of the features of the program that Carlos added is if you want to know the quick statistics, you can click on the planetary line, you can right click and look at angle. You look at the angle and you look at quick statistics, it will tell you what the percentages were. But you got to have enough data in there to determine that, or it's not going to be that significant. So you want to have more than just a few years of price data. You want to go back maybe 10 or 20 years if you're looking at daily data. But it will tell you the percentage of what happened during that time. But it doesn't confirm the correct price levels, the highs or the lows. So that's why I don't pay as much attention to that. But that can be helpful information when you combine it with other tools. Happen and what happened. Yes. Okay, I'd like to go on now. I have another chart example. I want to go to page 11. So everyone sees the Venus-Neptune reversal. I'm going to take that off. And if you can go to October 2003, that date, you can scroll forward for the S&P cash. S&P cash, I want you to go to October 2003, page 11. You see this top here where my cursor is? If you click on the bar there, we have a series of aspects. The day before, we have Mercury square Saturn on the 14th of October 2003. Does everybody have their cash chart on? They can add these settings. We have Mercury square Saturn on October 14th. We can go to planets and aspects and double click on angles between planets and edit. Type in 90 for the angle and check Mercury and Saturn. You can make the bar thicker and we'll color the bar. We then go to planetary lines. We add Mercury, we add Saturn. We edit the lines to 90. We have factor 0, and what do you see? It doesn't look right. That Mercury 360 line is strong, but it's below, it's not working. And the Mercury 90 line, it's too vertical, it's not right. You know when your factors aren't right, when the lines look like that. Like the Mercury line goes up like that, it's not right. So we're going to adjust the factor to -1. And that's a little bit better, it nailed the low here. And if we change Saturn to -1, that's what it looks like. But what if we adjust it to factor -2? Factor minus 2, the lines are how many points apart for the square of 90?
4.5.
9 points at 90.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And we have the thick blue line there. That's the Saturn 360 line. I use this as an example for a particular reason. The thick blue line is the Saturn 360 line. Mercury squared Saturn. The day before, the following day, we gap up the highs right at resistance at the Saturn 360 line where the Mercury-Saturn lines cross. So if you're long, that's a profit point, and you think about reversing position. And where do we come back down to? We came down 1, 2, 3, 4 Mercury-Saturn lines. 4 times 9 is what? 360. That takes price down to the next 360 line of Saturn. The trend's up. If you get out, that's a counter trend trade. That serves as support. We bounce off that line, we continue back up again. And if you want to look at Fibonacci retracements, you can connect the low, the September to the top, and that's just past the 50% retracement. But this is an example of the first harmonic lines and how strong that is, and the Mercury-Saturn aspect took price up there to that harmonic. And that's how strong it is. And it held as support, 336 points roughly lower. So that's a vibration. It's a multiple of 90, 90 times 4.
And would you take a little profit off that day of the actual aspect, even though you know the 360 line is up a little higher, or would you got enough confidence on that 360 line just to wait and take your profit there?
I would look for confirmation of price hitting that. That's a profit point. We broke above this one. I'm prepared. You're prepared. You click on your aspect research. You know Mercury's going to square Saturn. You're looking at the 360 line. You know that's the first harmonic line. It's the strongest line. You're looking for resistance to hold there and that to be a top as a profit point. Then you could even reverse position if you want, or you could just stand aside. And then price comes down just past the 50% retracement. We hit the Saturn 360 line here.
But because it wasn't correct on the day of the actual aspect, you feel like it's going to go further.
Well,
You see what I'm saying?
it was a correct high the day based on the aspect the day before. But because the trend's still up, I think, yeah, it would continue further. And because the reversal happened, the bottom happened also at the Saturn 360 line.
Yeah, you didn't know that at the time. I understand.
I've always had a comment on it. When you say price vibrates, what do you mean vibrate? What does that mean vibrate?
I can make a joke about that, but I won't go there. Vibration is just numbers radiating.
But I mean, is it related to like music? Or
It's like music vibration, yeah. It's like if you want to think of it philosophically, it could have to do with the vibration of an angle between planets and how that relates to price. So there's an angle between Mercury and Saturn at 90 degrees. And that means 9 and 90 is going to be strong based on that angle. And price, so to say, is vibrating at that harmonic, just like in music.
so is music a good analogy?
Yeah, music is very much related to all of this in astrology, because music is about vibration, and putting all this together is an art form like music.
The other thing is, say you're 3 bars behind that thick line at the top. Is there a sense where you think, well, that line's thick, it's going to just attract price up to it?
Yeah, you're thinking it's going to attract it. Yes, it's kind of like an attraction. But I'm not predicting it's going to go there. I'm just, yes, I'm anticipating resistance to hold there if it's reached, if it's hit. It is kind of a vibration, and you notice the low is at this Mercury line here. And the high is at the Saturn line. The low is at the Mercury line. Well, this high and this low were the 360 line for Saturn. Yeah, that's you're right. That's the Mercury 360 line also. Everybody catch that? This low is the Mercury 360 line. So we could click on aspect research, click on the bar around that date. And here's a Mercury square Pluto a couple days before. You see, Mercury crossing the 24, Mercury square Pluto on the 28th of September, right? That was on the Sunday. When you get reversal days on a Saturday or Sunday, you're looking for a reversal on the Friday or the Monday, before or after. So since the Mercury crossing 24 square Pluto was on Sunday, you're looking for reversal on the Monday or Tuesday. Well, in this case, we got the correct low at the Mercury 360 line 2 days after the aspect. But that low relates to the Mercury square Pluto aspect and crossing the 24. So you want your Mercury lines on, and if you see a Mercury 360 line and you see aspects related to Mercury, you know that's going to be very strong. Just like the Uranus line, the Uranus mirror line for the E-mini, with Uranus crossing the 24 and Mercury semi-square Uranus. You know, Uranus is going to be very strong. And look where it's worked so far with the E-mini for, we've been up since last Thursday off that low. We've still got to break further above resistance, but that's going to be a strong support level this week. In any case, it's a good short-term trade, whatever happens. I'm using quote.com for my data currently. Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, after we come back after the break, I'd like to talk about that because I mentioned we had a turnaround with gold. I'm looking, the next turnaround is going to be around May 17th. And there's a reason why we planned this event this weekend. And it's after Mercury went direct. And there's a positive Mercury-Pluto trine, which is good for mind expansion and learning. And we're at the verge of a major turning point in the markets. We have Jupiter going direct today. And I wanted to give you some information and alert you of opportunities coming up right away that you can take advantage of this month. And the next big one is around the 17th of May. We have a Venus-Neptune both going stationary retrograde on the same day. And if any of you follow any of Ray Merriman's quantitative analysis and research, those are both the strongest level 1 reversal signatures when Venus and Neptune go retrograde. And Venus goes retrograde every year and a half for about 6 weeks. And it happens on the same day. That's a very rare occurrence. So if we got a nice low off of gold and gold continues to rally until the 17th, you think I'm going to stay long gold? Or my gold fund or gold stocks? No, I'll be thinking of covering and reversing. But I'll always be looking for confirmation with a high, the right planetary high. So that's the big turning point this month to take advantage of.
What about if gold rallies and then comes back down to one of these levels and then on May 7th?
Then it could reverse back up. That's where we have to stay flexible.
You have to have, I guess, to start off with your color glasses that you have on. When you're looking at this, has to be based upon what the trends are.
Right. Everything happens relative to the trend. So it depends what the trend is before that aspect occurs.
So unless your head's screwed on right to the trend, everything else is going to get kind of...
That's right. See, the Astro doesn't always tell you the direction. The price, it'll tell you the days for reversals. The planetary price levels will tell you whether it's going to be a reversal back up or down. The price will tell you what direction. But you don't know until the aspect happens and what the trend is prior to that time. So assuming gold goes up until the 17th, then that would be reversal back down. But what if it failed next week and we come back down even further? And that could be reversal back up. So we have to stay flexible. But it'd always be confirmed with price being at the right levels.
That's sort of being confirmed by Jupiter trying the sun to were pointing out which direction. On a high first time, it reverses back to the low.
On the low. And that makes it even stronger for a reversal because it was at the top. So I'm looking for at the bottom. Actually, Jupiter went retrograde close to the time of the top in gold, and Jupiter is going direct close to the bottom. So that's very significant. That's another factor to consider.
Is the May 17th, is that just for the gold, or is that for all markets?
Most markets, you're looking for turning points. But we need to break for lunch, but when we come back, I'm going to show you, you can go to aspects and click on going retrograde, going direct. And you can just click on Jupiter, going retrograde, and then going direct. And it will tell you, it'll plot on the bars here when that happened. And here's Jupiter going direct. But we'll come back to that. I think we need a break because when we come back from lunch, Tim's going to be speaking on some other interesting approaches that are different from my own. And he's got decades of experience. So I think you'll get a lot out of that at 1 o'clock when we come back.
Ted, is it okay to use a black screen background from an astro point?
From an astro point, I recommend using a black screen because
I just need some confirmation.
yeah, it's confirmation. I haven't had a problem using a black screen. In fact, I prefer it because it's like outer space. Think of black as outer space, not negative, it's space. And the planetary lines are colorful. You need a black background, a dark background for them to stand out. It doesn't work with a light background.
It just uses a lot more black ink.
Right, yeah, except unless you're printing charts out.
Come in, gentlemen, come in, come in. I think we got everybody here. Very good then, okay. I was just talking with Tom Hartle about his cats, Ilsa and Laszlo. You know, when I was in junior high school, I really wanted my parents to let me get a dog. And I wanted to have a puppy so it could eat my homework for me. As some of you may have heard, I haven't spent a whole lot of time, or observed, I haven't spent a lot of time in this room in the last couple of days because I've been dealing with a computer virus. The now infamous Sasser worm hit my computer on Saturday morning, and it had started gutting my laptop of all kinds of key files, and it's quite stubborn, actually. Fortunately, I got everything up and running again about 12 hours ago, and so I guess it's more prestigious to have your speech eaten by a worm than it is to have your homework eaten by your dog, but you know, that's almost what happened, so we're grateful to be here, right? Okay. You know, an extended workshop like this is a great opportunity, largely because it gives us a chance to get a lot of different opinions and points of view, and that's one of the fun things about it. We get it not only from the speakers, but of course from other people we meet as we participate. And it's kind of like the old story that I'm sure you've all heard about the blind man and the elephant. You know, the blind guys are trying to find out what an elephant is like, and one of them grabs the trunk and says, "Oh, elephants are like snakes," right? Another guy comes up and feels the side. Elephants are like walls, man. And then the third blind man grabs the tail of the elephant and says, elephants are like ropes. Very bad smelling ropes. You know? But I'm not so sure if it's simply that question of different points of view as it is trying to determine what you already know and what you don't know, where you are in your own trading experience, and what's relevant for you. And that's one of the challenges that we face in putting something like this together. It's a lot like the famous story about Mullah Nasruddin. Anybody heard of Mullah Nasruddin before? You've heard of Nasruddin. Oh, Eric is well informed. This is good. He's the legendary trickster sage of the Middle Eastern fables, and he's always saying strange things and doing all kinds of intriguing stuff. One time, Mullah Nasruddin appeared in the marketplace in the town square in front of a group of people, and a crowd gathered because he was the local wise man. They wanted to know what he was thinking and saying, and he said, "Oh, people, do you have any idea what I'm about to tell you?" And they said, "No. How could we know that?" Nasruddin said, "Well, if you're that ignorant, why should I bother even talking to you?" And he went home. The next day, Nasruddin comes back to the marketplace, and he says, "Oh, people, do you know what it is I'm about to tell you?" And they're getting wise here. Yeah. Why should I waste my time telling you? And he goes back home. So the third day, Nasruddin comes back to the marketplace. The crowd gathers again. And he says, "People, do you know what I'm about to tell you?" They said, "Look, Nasruddin, we got to be honest about this. Some of us do, and some of us don't." Okay? He says, "That's good. The ones who do tell the ones who don't, and I'm going back home." Okay? But instead of leaving you sitting here talking to yourselves, I thought it would be better to tell you a little bit about myself to begin with, and that way you at least get to know who's not telling you anything today. I, in 1988, began publishing an astro trading newsletter called Financial Cycles, and it was a print publication that I distributed monthly and biweekly at various times, and it went through its own evolution over the years, its own growth and maturing process, just as this whole field of planetary training has grown and matured. After about 14 years in print, it turned into an email newsletter a few years ago, and I send it to subscribers around the world at the start of each trading week. Each week in Financial Cycles Weekly Update, I make some comments on the current market activity. I kind of get on my soapbox and complain about whatever's going on. The readers this week are hearing about my computer woes, so that's the great privilege of freedom of the press. There's freedom of the press for the man who owns one, so that's I indulge that a little bit anyway. But I also talk about what's going on astrologically and geopolitically, and each week I try to help my readers identify opportunities that are coming up in the markets. Each week I also track a model portfolio of stocks. This was an issue from mid-March, I think, so none of those positions are in there currently. Report on the stock selections, on the portfolio performance, what trades are active, where we're setting our stop-loss levels, and so forth. And this is something that's changing fairly constantly. Right now we've got positions being held an average of 8.9 trading days. So we're doing short-term position trading with this portfolio rather than intraday trading. More recently, I've added a website. It provides some background information that supports the weekly email newsletter. And on this website, you'll find some back issues of the newsletter. If you're interested in looking at that, there's an archive there, so you can kind of look it over at your own pace. The website's www.timboss.com. And in addition to that, there are answers to questions on financial astrology, some free downloads, some monographs, some links to other goodies, including the Galactic Trader site and so forth. So then also on the website, I post regular updates giving a daily astrological calendar for traders, and then the latest moves in the portfolio on a day-to-day basis. So if we close out any positions or get into positions, you can follow along with that. So that's what I do, and during the time that I've been doing that, I have gained a lot of insights into what doesn't work in the markets. Through my own publishing and research, through my own trading, it has been an enormous education, and I've gotten fascinated with the work of a couple of guys that you may have heard of, who we really consider pioneers in this whole game of astro trading. Anybody heard of Mr. Bayer and Mr. Gann? Anybody not heard of them before? I want to talk about them a little bit today because some of their techniques are applicable to the Galactic Trader software, and in fact inspired some of the features in the software. So we want to see how this relates to what these guys were doing. Now, they were more or less contemporaries. Gann was born in the 1900s in Texas. Bayer immigrated from Germany in about 1899, and they both did most of their work during the first half of the last century, the first half of the 20th century. There are some similarities between the two. Both men used market geometry. They both had some agricultural background and some agricultural knowledge, and they had a strong spiritual orientation. They were both religious individuals, although they had different views on religion. They both did extensive research outside the markets as well as having lots of trading experience. So they had a broad background, and they used some pretty unorthodox methods. You read the work of Gann and Bayer, and you'll find things there that you simply don't find in other trading approaches. And that's what makes them a little mysterious and what has given them kind of an aura, a reputation, if you will, that's attractive to many people. Both of them actually had fairly lousy attempts at writing novels, as if you read them as novels. But both of their writings in fiction contained important ideas for trading and important insights. Some people will read Gann as a coded kind of thing. Yeah, question?
Did Gann make any money? I mean, it ranges from $50 million to some saying we didn't get.
Who knows? They're both legendary, and I don't purport to be an expert on the biographies of the men.
Yeah,
what I do is...
If he didn't make any money, you kind of have to wonder. I mean, some people argue like that, maybe make his money with selling it.
Right, right. Well, basically what we're doing today is looking at some of their techniques and testing them ourselves in a modern context. We're not trying to duplicate what they did. There are many teachers out here, especially in the Gann field, that will give you insights into Gann's work. Fran, you have a comment? Or have you? Oh, you were, wait, okay. Okay, good. Just looking good as usual. What can I say? Okay, good. And both men didn't use just astrology. They both did use astrology, but they both combined it with technical analysis in particular ways. When we look at market geometry, both of them paid attention to the angles of price movement and the planetary positions. But they had some differences here. Gann used Gann wheels and the square of 9 and so forth to look at market movements and to determine price limits. Very, very intriguing tools, very useful tools. Bayer explored the uses of ellipses, which he would overlay on technical charts in various sizes and at various angles to try to determine the bounds of market movement. Now, we mentioned they both had agricultural knowledge. Gann was born on a cotton farm and had great experience in cotton. Bayer's expertise was more in wheat. But the important thing for us today is that they learned about seasonality of the markets through those experiences. Now, if you're trading agriculturals, obviously it would be worthwhile to spend a little more time reading their stuff in detail. If you're doing wheat futures, by all means read Bayer, because there's a tremendous amount of material and histories of how he traded wheat and the things he determined and so forth. And he has a whole set of trading rules that apply just to wheat trading that are quite intriguing. But if you're into other markets that may not be as applicable, the important thing to understand is that there is the seasonality in the markets. Both men understood that trading is an inside job. and they both related their own personal spiritual lives and development to that dynamic in trading. We have to keep our heads clear. Whether it's certain rituals we go through, prayers we say, meditation, hypnosis, whatever it is that we do to keep ourselves focused in the markets, it's imperative that we do that. And in fact, Bayer wrote a book on Bible interpretation. Gann wrote what's it called, The Magic Word, which is all about chanting the name of God and using prayers in different situations and how to handle your prayer life when you're sick or when you need more money or what have you. So it's very interesting. They didn't write just about trading. They were very, very clear about spiritual development. Both of them did extensive research, as we've mentioned before. Bayer studied foreign languages. He spoke 5 or 6 different languages. Cultural history, wrote about fairy tales, all kinds of intriguing things in his background. And Gann studied the pyramids, did research in the British Museum, looked at records from the Middle East, and some of his Gann wheels were developed in India to start with. Eric, you have a comment?
Well, real quick, it seems like you know that these two characters. Is there a couple books you could recommend on each one, or is there another lot of writing on both?
Yeah, on my website there's a bibliography section there, and I make some specific recommendations there. There's a book by Bayer called Putting 400 Years of Astrology to Practical Use, which is an interesting one about trading, but he actually wrote half a dozen books on astrology. And it's interesting, too, in the approach of these two men, how they handled astrology. Gann, at times, would admit to being an astrologer, and we have records of his correspondence with some of his clients discussing their natal charts and their personal astrological cycles. He mentions astrology in his novel and talks about his belief in astrology. But for the most part, his use of astrology was fairly veiled. He would talk about it as science and was very concerned, about what the folks at the Methodist Church would say if they knew he was dabbling in astrology. And so he kind of kept that very private as to what his techniques were. And that's created a lot of the aura of mystery around Gann. He used astrology to develop the planetary lines that are an integral part of the Galactic Trader program today. We'll talk about that in more detail in a moment. Bayer, on the other hand, was very, very open about his use of astrology. He said, this is how you make money in the markets. You use astrology. And that was a fairly radical thing to do and say in the first half of the 20th century. And his books on financial astrology, he's quite clear to say, this is not your normal newspaper horoscope astrology we're talking about. This is something else. I have my own methods, and if you're relying on that stuff, you're in trouble. So he developed some unique tools that give us some interesting insights today. Let's talk a little bit about the planetary lines, and basically what we are doing in setting up planetary lines on the chart. We convert the zodiacal position of a planet to the 360-degree equivalent. And we convert the zodiac notation just to the 360-degree notation. We find the corresponding positions on the universal clock and match the current trading range on the wheel of the universal clock. If you don't already have a copy of Jeannie Long's book, The Universal Clock, be sure to get one, because it goes into a great deal of detail about how all this works, how all this is set up. And the universal clock is essentially a wheel of 24 that enables us to find corresponding number levels as you work your way out of the wheel from 1 all the way through 360. Then we can also modify the numerical equivalent of the planetary positions by simply altering decimal points, moving them to the right or to the left, again to match the current trading range. Now, that's how it works. We'll give some examples in a little bit more detail. But first of all, we want to understand what the planetary lines are for. They're here to help us define support and resistance and to pick out trading ranges. This is not something you use in a trading system by itself. It works well with other things. Okay? And it's most helpful in this particular area. How far is something going to move? Where is the support? Where is the resistance? Is this moving in a range or not? And what are our expectations accordingly? Now I mentioned we convert to 360-degree equivalents, and I think that was in the handout as well in case you're not already familiar with this. This is fundamental to this whole work because when you start talking astrology, there's a huge amount of confusion between what sign are you, which is what you ask at the party, okay, and where is something in a sign of the zodiac. And the fact is, when we're asking somebody what sign they are, what we're really asking is where's the placement of the sun in your natal chart? And where along a ruler, a circular ruler of 360 degrees, does that sun fall? And if it's in the sign of Aries, it's going to be in the first 12th of that, between the 0 point and the 30 point. If you're a sun sign Taurus, it'll be between 30 and 60 degrees, and so forth. So the zodiac functions just as an elaborate ruler. It simply gives us even dividing points by which we can measure position. And that's not the same implication as, hey, the sun's in Libra right now, so this is a great time to do whatever, or I need to meet more long-haired people or whatever, okay? I mean, there's that whole side of astrology, and that's a lot of fun, and it's very entertaining, and you can actually find some things in there that work. But that's not what we're talking about when we talk about planetary positions, and it's real important to understand that. We're talking about a ruler here. And imagine it as if you have a yardstick, and on one side it has inches, and on the other side it has centimeters. They both measure the same thing, it's just two different systems of doing it. So we can say between 0 degrees and 360 degrees, or we can say from 0 Aries all the way up to the end of Pisces, and we're talking about the same thing. Most important in understanding this work. So let's give some examples. For example, if we happen to have Jupiter or any planet at 4 degrees Virgo. Virgo is equal to 150 degrees, and then we'd add 4 more to it. That would be the placement of 4 degrees Virgo is equal to the number 154. On the universal clock, we'll find these equivalents, and you'll notice that all these numbers are 24 apart. So 130, for example, is 24 less than 154. 178 is 24 more than 154. It goes all the way down to 10, and all the way up to 346. These would be all the increments on the universal clock. So if we have something at 4 degrees Virgo, it's going to impact prices at all these levels, potentially. These are our hot spots that we're going to start to look at for planetary correspondences with something going on at 4 degrees of Virgo. Does that make sense? Okay. Then we can also take these same numbers and move decimal points, and they have the same numeric equivalent. We can make 154 15.4. 10 can become 1 or 100 by moving a decimal point, and so forth. So that gives us a picture of how this works. Let's look at one more example. Here's something that's not an even number of degrees. If Mars is at 18 degrees and 45 minutes of Scorpio, now remember the degree notation is in 60s. You know, there's 60 minutes to a degree. So 45 degrees is equal to 3/4, or 45 minutes is equal to 3/4 of a degree. So we'd say there that Mars is at 228.75, you know, for that 3/4. And again, we can shift that decimal point to 22.88 or 2.29, you know, rounding it off a little bit. $2.29 if we're looking at something that trades at that range. The universal clock equivalents then can be corresponding to any of these, depending on where we put them on the wheel. And we can translate into prices in a variety of ranges as the example illustrates. So this is the way then that we begin to generate the planetary lines by finding the price equivalents of planetary positions. It all goes back to this conversion to the 360 notation and then converting it into the appropriate trading range of whatever it is that we're trading. So we create the lines by connecting the daily positions of the planets with their price equivalents. If we're graphing it out by hand instead of having a wonderful program like Galactic Trader, that's exactly what we do. We sit down and calculate every one of those, look in a book of planetary motion called an ephemeris, and find out where is the planet today, where is it tomorrow, and draw the line between it, converting it on the price chart. Now, the factors in our program, in the Galactic program, you can set it for -1 or 0 or +1. That corresponds to moving the decimal point. Was you that was talking about that earlier, Leonard? Yeah. This is one of the concerns. What happens when we start monkeying with that setting? We're just kind of doing it at random to figure out what fits? Well, no, we're moving the decimal point to say this is more appropriate for a trading range at $2.28 instead of $22.80. So whatever the setting there is, that will confine that planetary line in its first increment to that specific price range. Now, additional increments of the lines come on division of that wheel of 360. And we typically do that by integers. We divide it by 24. That gives us slices of 360 degrees that are 15 degrees apart. It's like slicing a pie into sections. So if we've got a planetary line at 11 degrees, and we're dividing it by 15, then we're going to add 24 to that. And the next increment up would be 35. So, $11, $35, and so forth, based on that division. Now, we can look at longer-term price history. So this is a multi-year chart for a stock. And what we've thrown up here, the blue lines are Jupiter lines. And we can begin to see the lasting impact of planetary trends. You can see how this is trading along those lines. Now, this line in the middle, the heavy line on the chart, is the original planetary line, the primary or first harmonic planetary line. All the other ones are increments of that line. Now, we can get a lot of information from a chart like this, but if we start to reduce the number of lines, it actually gives us more information. More or less is more with this kind of work. The temptation is to get lines all over the chart, and you can't tell what's going on. You don't know how to make any sense of it. So our whole aim here in doing this kind of work is to reduce the number of variables, to get less information on the chart, so that we can begin to construct trading rules around this kind of information that we can then go back and backtest. That's what we're working for in all this work. Okay? Now, here we've cut the number of blue Jupiter lines in half, and we get a little bit clearer information about the major price movements of this stock. We get a little bit of the debris about. Now here's the same chart, and we'll zoom in on a shorter term time frame. And all of a sudden this starts to look like something. Okay? My point in showing you these long-term charts is to say, hey, this stuff holds, and it holds for years, sometimes decades at a time, in defining long-term movements of individual equities, of market averages, of commodities. This stuff really does work. And the more you do that kind of research work and see that it holds long-term, the more you'll trust it short-term when it's an added indicator in a trade. If I've got a technical setup that tells me this price is hitting a limit here, and a Fibonacci is due, and there's a planetary line that comes through as well, and I know that planetary line has worked with some level of consistency for the last 15 years, oh, ding, maybe I should do something, you see? That's where we are in moving it in. Now, again, we don't develop a trading system using planetary lines by themselves. If that's your intention in this room today, then you haven't been listening much over the last couple of days. Okay? We need a little bit more than that. They're best when they're combined with technical indicators. They can be used very effectively to help set price objectives or to set stop-loss levels. And they're the strongest when we find that kind of confirmation, when other indicators are saying the same thing and it all comes together for us. That's really what we're looking for in this kind of work. Now, in my own work, what I found is that the information we can get from charting planetary lines can really be enhanced if we take a look at what we call a first trade horoscope. Now we're going to get into some astrology. Now we're going to move into Mr. Bayer. Because George Bayer, about 60 years ago, in fact I think it was in his publication in 1944, which would be exactly 60 years ago, he wrote about the first trade horoscope as a tool for market analysis. The first trade chart, the first trade horoscope, is set for the starting time of the trading day on the date when the stock or the commodity was first available to the general public for purchase. When did this first start trading? And we start that at the beginning of the trading day. Now this is a very, very important piece of information here. The first trade chart, let me repeat, is set for the beginning of the trading day, not for the time when the first tick goes through on that stock or commodity. There's a lot of discussion about what's valid. Bayer's statement was very direct about this. I'm following his model here, okay? He was very, very specific. A trader in stocks can use the day of listing of a stock as the moment of the beginning. By listing, I do not mean the time when the board of directors of the stock exchange allows the stock to be traded at some later date, but the 10 a.m. time, that was when the market opened in his day, the 10 a.m. time of the day when it is possible for the first time to trade that stock. Do not take the moment of the first trade, which might occur at 10:41 a.m. or 12:12 p.m. of that specific day, but use the 10 a.m. moment. If someone wanted to trade, i.e. to buy or sell that stock, he could have done so at 10 a.m. already. Traders who trade commodities can use the charts made for the moment a commodity was first traded. So that's what a first trade chart is. It's set up for that moment.
Real quick, so if I understand this correctly, there's commodities, it's the moment the first trade happens, and the stocks is when the market happens.
Yeah, for the first trade, all right. 9:30 right now Eastern Time, Eastern Daylight, Eastern Standard Time. Yeah.
It was something that was traded in Chicago, it was a commodity, I guess you have to have one side of the first kind of.
Yeah, and what Bayer did was use a chart for wheat back to 1500 and something. You know, I mean, so he said he had done the research and found that. And so he was trying to extrapolate when they actually began trading that day. And the more you get into Bayer, the loonier it gets, okay? We're not talking about staying sane here. I just want to be very clear about that. And so it's not always consistent, and we're going to get pretty fringy here in a few minutes, so hang with me. Now, the chart we were looking at a moment ago, by the way, was General Electric. Let's put that back up there. The planetary lines that are in place on this chart are on the basis of the first trade horoscope. And that's what we want to focus on here today. Why are these particular lines in place? Now, if you go to your Galactic Trader program, there is built into it a list of company data. Up here at the top, we got this little icon that looks like a tablet there, or a piece of paper. You click on that, and it'll drop down a list of companies. And then if we right-click on the name of the company, use your right mouse button and not the left mouse button, you will then get the charts. And you get a choice of an incorporation chart or a first trade chart. What we're looking at is a first trade chart. This is what the first trade chart for GE looks like in the Galactic Trader program. And what we've got with the program are abbreviations for the planetary names. There's a pointer thingy here. This is in Galactic Trader. Show where it is, Eric. Can you see it? It should be in there. If not, we'll call Carlos. Yeah, you can open and close different things in the toolbar, so that might be what's going on there. Okay, got it? So you right-click on that, it'll drop down the list. You select one on the list, and then you've got various chart options. This is set up here for having houses on. You can have either Koch or Placidus houses in the chart. These are the kinds of things that mean something to astrologers. It's a matter of personal preference how you set all that up. And what we've got here is an interesting combination on these wheels, because we've got the symbols for the signs of the zodiac. This is Aries here, but all the planets are abbreviated, and we don't use the symbols in this particular program, the symbols for the planets. Why, I'm not sure, but there is this option. If you prefer in the program, you can toggle it over to have little green balls instead. And if that's more meaningful to you, or if you are so apprehensive about using astrology, you can look at the little green and yellow and blue balls and say, okay, there's stuff moving around in the chart of these positions. And for me personally, that's not terribly informative. So I tend not to use that feature of the software. In fact, what I typically do is use software from someone else that gives me the astrological glyphs. This is the GE first trade chart in the program called Solar Fire, and what it does is give the symbols for everything. And because my background's in astrology, it's easier for me to see this. I mean, that's the only difference. So it's a matter of personal preference. It's giving you the same information. Now, when we look at this chart with the GE chart, there are certain things that we look at in our analysis of this. Now, it's beyond our scope here today to teach you all the rudiments of horoscope chart analysis. It, in fact, takes years to master that. But we want to point out a couple of key features that we're using here to identify certain planets in the chart. And this is the core of the work that I do, or one of the key pieces, let's put it that way. We're looking at a chart, and we have what we call the angles of the chart. Over here on the left is the ascendant. This is the eastern horizon in the chart, if you will, and its opposite point is the descendant on the western horizon. And then overhead we have something appropriately called the midheaven, and then down at the bottom the IC, abbreviation for the Latin Immum Caeli, the bottom of heaven, okay? And these four angles of the chart, we refer to them as the angles of the horoscope, are highly sensitive points. So whenever we have planets near those points, they take on more importance. And in the chart for GE, we find the planet Venus at 22 degrees of Aries. The midheaven of the chart is 22 degrees of Aries. This says we need to be paying attention to Venus when we're looking at planetary patterns in trading GE stock. It's funny, we don't think of GE as a very Venus kind of company. But again, this is astrology that works. It's not about the interpretation or the meanings or the implications or the symbolic references of planets and signs. And that's what keeps this stuff from getting way out there too loony. We also have a dominant feature in the chart, which is what we call an opposition. Jupiter over here is 180 degrees approximately away from Neptune. So Neptune and Jupiter take on some prominence in this chart as well. Now that's what we've done here with these planetary lines on the GE trading chart. The green lines on the chart are the Venus lines. And here we've got everything set at heliocentric lines, division by 24 with no factor. It's no plus or minus on there at all, okay? So it's just straight default settings. And the Venus lines go up at an angle like this. We have added mirrored Venus lines going down. So we get this lattice work, this grid work pattern. Notice how the stock tends to trend right along those Venus lines. It'll move up, and then down along the Venus line, up and down, closely hugging the Venus lines in the price movement of the GE stock. What's happening is that we have the magenta line in this case is the Neptune, and the blue line is Jupiter, and that's what's providing some support and resistance. Here's Neptune. Notice the places where the price movement turns on Neptune. So it's moving in terms of Venus and its speed and energy, but also being bounded in the movement by Neptune with the support and resistance there. Now we'll switch this chart back to a little bit longer time frame. We looked at it like multi-year chart a little while ago. And we can see here on the longer time frame, again, how these lines define support and resistance. And this is the kind of thing that, again, builds confidence in the trading situation. If we've seen this work for a while, then we can understand its higher probability of working in future. Yes?
Do you use geocentric or heliocentric?
These are all heliocentric settings for the time being.
Generally.
I generally use geocentric. Okay? These are giving, yes, Eric?
Quick question for you. I noticed that GE has a birthday coming up on the 27th.
Right.
So what can this tell us about it? How would we...
It might be a good time to look at it. You know, GE is great because it has a long trading history. And we can go back and look at the solar return, its birthdays over those years, and see what happens when the sun kicks in with that cycle as well. Now, we didn't pick the sun in this case because it didn't have a prominent planetary placement in the first trade chart. Okay? So, but it doesn't mean it's irrelevant, and it might be something worth looking at in terms of what GE does around its birthday. Jupiter in this longer term chart, and here we got heliocentrics at 24, not mirrored, the 0 factor. And we can see on the blue Jupiter lines exactly where the price is turning over an extended period of time. Let's go back and look quickly at the things we did a little while ago. This chart we looked at first was January 1996 through April of 2000. A little over 4 years of trading in GE stock. And this is Jupiter at 24 helio is the setting. Okay? We're seeing how it bounds the stock. But again, we're trying to do more with less. So we've got a setting of 24 helio. Let's change that to 48 helio. That divides it and reduces the number of lines. We still have defined trading channels here, trading ranges. GE likes Jupiter. Okay? We'll divide it again. Double 48 gives us 96, so we set our factor at helio 96. And we still have GE in that trading range. Okay? Now here's an interesting move in this area. I think I've highlighted that. Let's see. Yeah. Notice that the stock is bounded by the Jupiter lines. It's trading right in that range, and it's moving down right along the Venus line. Now when we get this many lines on a long-term chart with the Venus lines, it's basically just a grid pattern, okay? So that's not highly relevant. In short-term, day-to-day trading, it's going to give us more information. What we're really looking at here with this particular diagram are the Jupiter lines. And that's a relevant place to look. What have we got on time? We've got